Discussing what is philosophy, especially modern philosophy, I refer to Kant's conception of absolute critique. So, just wanted to talk a bit about Kant's notion of absolute critique, because I think with Descartes, Kant's conception of absolute critique is the basis of a conception of philosophy which we have called negative philosophy, or negative conception of philosophy. As compared to positive conception of philosophy. And this negative conception of philosophy put everything, without exception, everything under its powers of judgments. So this is conception of philosophy as a critique of everything and anything, an absolute critique, unending, unbending critique. We saw some of its manifestation in Barry Stroud's conception of philosophy, which we are still dealing with. We still looking at it. Descartes is obviously the other proponent of that sort of conception of philosophy, which is not to say that Kant or Descartes doesn't have positive conceptions of philosophy. In fact, most of their actual work is positive conception of philosophy. But Descartes' conception of radical doubt and Kant's conception of absolute critique provides the foundation of not only a lot of modernity, but also not just of philosophy, but modernity as a whole. So I just wanted to look at a passage from the Critique to just be a bit more aware of, or a bit more understanding of this conception of critique. And this is just a start, so we will look at it in much more. And this is a note to the footnote, which I actually want to read on his preface to the first edition of his critique of pure reason. And here Kant goes, now and again one hears complaints about the superficiality of our age. He's talking about his own age. And Kant does see his own age as a sort of a watershed. So he's talking about the present, his own present. And as you know, Michel Foucault, the French philosopher, an historian of thought, he makes a lot play on that Kant's notion of the philosophy of the present. So now and again one hears complaints about the superficiality of our age's way of thinking. So this our age the age of modernity, or the age of enlightenment, and about the decay of well-grounded sciences. Yet I do not see that those sciences whose grounds are well laid, such as mathematics, physics, etc., in the least deserve this charge. And obviously, sciences, especially the hard sciences, the whole and their prominence and their specific method was the hallmark of that age. And what Kant does is try to do the same for metaphysics and moral philosophy. And it wasn't just Kant. Before that, Hume had, tried to do it. And Kant's philosophy was, in a sense, response to the Humean philosophy, or Humean attempt. So, yet I don't see that those sciences whose grounds are well laid, such as mathematics, physics, etc., in the least deserve this charge. Rather, they maintain their old reputation for well-groundedness, and in the case of natural science, even surpass it. This same spirit would also prove itself effective in other species of cognition, if only care had first been taken to correct their principles. So that's what he wanted to do with philosophy and metaphysics especially. But these are the lines which I actually wanted to focus on. In the absence of this indifference, doubt, and finally strict criticism, in the absence of this, meaning that in the absence of well-groundedness in metaphysics and all that, in the absence of this, indifference, doubt, and finally strict criticism are rather proofs of a well-grounded way of thinking. In the absence of this, correct principles, indifference, doubt, and finally strict criticism are rather proofs of a well-grounded way of thinking. So criticism or critique in this sense provides the foundation for not only philosophy, but in a sense for our age as well, because our age is the genuine age of criticism. Eigentliche. So eigentlich in German means actual or intrinsic as well, or true. So our age is intrinsically, or the true age of criticism. And criticism, which is translation of German Kritik, it's also translated as critique because it's a sort of semi-technical term, so it'll become clear in a sense. Age is the genuine age of criticism, and so that's the absolute criticism I was talking about, to which everything must submit. Everything must submit. So that's the absoluteness of this critique. Nothing is exempt from this critique. This evaluation, this judgment, and this power of judgment on this, and the authority with which this critique lies, like, whose critique is legitimate is reason or philosophy in that way. Our age is the genuine age of criticism to which everything must submit. So it's a tribunal. A new tribunal is being set. So instead of the previous age where God or revelation or the civilization, Christian civilization was the tribunal, but now this new tribunal is being set. That's the tribunal of reason. Nothing is exempt from this tribunal. Everything must submit to it. He obviously even reason itself must submit to it, but that's different because in that case reason is submitting itself to itself. But on the other hand, everything else is submitting to it. So in that sense, reason is absolute. This criticism is absolute. And he goes on to say, religion through its holiness and legislation through its majesty commonly seek to exempt themselves from it. But in this way, they excite a just suspicion against themselves. So if religion and social norms want to exempt themselves from this tribunal, they will excite a suspicion because our age doesn't believe in any other absolute authority except reason. But in this way, they excite a just suspicion, that is a legitimate suspicion. So in that sense, this tribunal is the legitimate tribunal. But in this way, they excite a just suspicion against themselves and cannot lay claim to the unfeigned respect that reason grants only to that which has been able to withstand its free and public examination. So we have a new Lord, a new God, which is called reason. And the thing is, that's all fine, but reason, there are many conceptions of reason, so obviously necessarily only one conception of reason being made the Lord or judge, and that choice is basically a historical and contingent choice, even though Kant makes it clear that reason itself also judge. Right? Reason itself is not exempt from that. So he said this is evidently the effect not of the thoughtlessness of our age. Now I'm going to the text, but its ripened power of judgment, which will no longer be put off with illusory knowledge. He's here talking about metaphysics, especially medieval metaphysics, which was part and parcel of Christian civilization. So illusory knowledge, and Descartes called that illusory knowledge as well, and that's why he developed its methods. So, which demands that reason should take on anew the most difficult task of all its tasks, namely that of self-knowledge, and to institute a court of justice by which reason may secure its rightful claims while dismissing all its groundless pretensions, and this not by mere decrees but according to its own eternal and unchangeable laws. And this court is none other than the critique of pure reason itself. So although reason itself is to be judged first of all and clear itself, but it is different in the sense that here reason is judging itself, so that it can prove that it is worthy of judging everybody else. So that's the conception of criticism which I've been talking about. I also want to go to footnote where he talks about the meaning of criticism in Kant. The meaning of criticism in Kant. Okay, let's see. Yep. The term critique, this is from the translators and editors. The term critique or criticism, that is critic in German, was apparently first derived by Kant from Henry Home, Lord Kames, from his book Elements of Criticism, which he was obviously influenced by Hume, but other English and Scottish thinkers of the age, especially those who worked on the judgment of taste and beauty and all that, in which he referred to judgments in matter of beauty or taste Kant's first use of it is in an announcement for lectures in 1765, 1766. As early as 1769, Kant defines critique as a science, not for bringing forth, but for assessing certain things. So critique assesses in accordance with rules of perfection. And those rules of perfection are to be found in reason, I guess. Thus, metaphysics is a science for assessing cognitions from pure reason. So critique are the rules of assessment. And reason first assesses itself and clears its rules and become transparent to itself through its self-knowledge about its own rules. But then through that, it actually deserves for itself the sole judge of everything else and the sole tribunal for everything else. So he's talking about self-knowledge. To agree, self-knowledge. So, wow, that's so. And then once it's done, so everything must submit to reason. Our age is the genuine age to which everything must submit to this criticism of reason, this assessment based on reason. Religion, through its holiness, and legislation, through its majesty, commonly seek to exempt themselves from it, but in this way they excite a just suspicions against themselves and cannot lay claim to that unfeigned respect. That reason grounds only to that which has been able to withstand free and public examination. That's why henceforth religion would be only religion within the bound of reason, as title of another of Kant books suggests. I think this sort of explains a bit my claim that the notion of negative philosophy as criticism, absolute criticism, is partially derived from Kant. Thank you.